What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So, I want to talk about Islam Makhachev and an aspect of his legacy in the wake of UFC 322, because, of course, what he did was insanely impressive. You know, to beat JDM like that, and not only to beat him, but to just comfortably dominate him for all 5 rounds, it's insane. It's a very meaningful impact on his legacy to have that win. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But, like, if you saw my prediction video, I was picking Islam to win, and I was actually picking him to win by sort of mid to late finish. That didn't ultimately materialize, although one of those Darce attempts was actually like pretty fucking close. Like it was this close to happening. But in any case, you know, doesn't get the finish, but he so easily won. He so clearly won. JDM was so dejected by the end. You can't do anything but praise Islam for that win. And I didn't even think it was a boring performance. I'm going to make a video on that later, and that might surprise those of you who've seen my videos criticizing Khamzat for his win over Dricus for being fucking boring and for it being Khamzat's fault. So more on that later, more on that down the road later in the week. But right now I kind of want to talk about what beating JDM does for Islam's legacy, what it does for him as an all-time GOAT, and where I'm still left wanting in certain ways, because something occurred to me after the win, and that is Islam Makhachev is just John Jones. Like he's John Jones in a much better division, but his career is like disturbingly similar to John Jones's. Obviously, he doesn't have any of the personal life issues. He's not a fucking degenerate criminal or anything. But as far as his participation in the sport, the two are like way too fucking comparable for my liking, because on the one hand, they're both all-time GOATs. You know, they're both on the GOAT list somewhere. They're both divisional great fighters, and they're both double champs, or at least they're champs in multiple divisions. Neither of them were simultaneous champs, so it depends on how you're using that phrase, double champ, or that term, double champ. But in any case, both of them are habitual cheaters. John Jones, of course, with his eye poking. And more people are shedding light on the fact that Islam grabs the gloves in every single fight, and he grabs them in order to secure takedowns and impact the fight in very meaningful ways. And sure, plenty of great fighters cheat. GSP grabbed Michael Bisping's shorts and ripped his jockstrap. Fedor Emelianenko would grab the ropes anytime he tried to take him down. Like, this happens. And I made a whole video about steroids and cheating and why I'm in favor, why I think MMA is better when there's more steroids and cheating. So I'm not complaining too much. But speaking of steroids, like, I caught flack last week for saying Islam is like obviously on gear now because he ostensibly was having trouble putting on weight, and then suddenly everything was going fine because he started using creatine for the first time. And he, I forget the name of the substance, but I did double check this. He popped in 2016 for a substance, a banned substance. He got excused because he claimed it was for medical purposes. One of his teammates popped for the same substance, also used the excuse that it was for medical purposes. And that's not impossible. You know, maybe they both got hurt. Maybe they both went to the same doctor, got prescribed the same thing. It's not impossible, but it's fucking suspicious. And it's suspicious that you are going up in weight, and all of a sudden you're putting this mass on, and it's all going well, and it's because you're using creatine for the first time, and there's all these amazing effects of creatine that you're just enjoying so much. All of that's wildly suspicious, people, and suspicious in addition to the fact that you should just assume anytime you look at any UFC fighter that there's a greater than 50% chance they're using something. And the higher up the chain you go, the higher up the rankings, when you look at champions, when you look at all-time GOATs, that should increase your suspicion that they're using something because of that level of success. It's unlikely they happen to be better than everyone else, and they're one of the few people not using anything. That's just unlikely, people. At any point, tirade aside, and bear in mind, I'm for steroids being allowed, so I'm not. This isn't even like a. Like that's why John Jones is on my GOAT list. Like I don't prohibit steroid cheats from being on my GOAT list. But so this isn't the point of the video, and it's not even meant to be a big knock against Islam. But I'm just saying that's a thing they have in common. They're both habitual cheats. Jones has popped multiple times for PEDs, so he's like the much more it's much less disputable that he's on stuff. Islam still has his defenders, but I suspect he's on stuff. But when you look at the resume itself, again, there's weird similarities. So they both have this incredible win streak in their divisions, and then they ultimately go up and win a second belt. And their win streaks in their divisions are very good, and they're like the best in their division's histories. But there's like weird caveats. There's weird asterisks. So like with Jon Jones, he fought a lot of small dudes. He fought a lot of light heavyweights who just should have been middleweights because the sport was shifting. Weight cutting was getting more extreme. He was like a modern light heavyweight fighting the old guard who didn't cut as much weight, were just much smaller than him. And it led to like good name value being on his resume, but he had this massive size advantage over like some huge amount of his opponents, especially during his early title reign. And it's similar for Islam. Like, Islam has fought almost exclusively like former featherweights. Dan Hooker, former featherweight. Oliveira, former featherweight. Volkanovski, twice, featherweight. Poirier, former featherweight. Moicano, former featherweight. Jon Jones, like, to go even further with that, like, he just fought actual middleweights to defend his belt. He defended his belt against Chael Sonnen and Vitor Belfort, who were both middleweights who just went up to fight him, and one of which was on short notice. The Vitor fight was on like a couple weeks' notice, which is, again, another thing that's very common for Islam, because the Moicano fight, short notice. The second Volk fight, short notice, and a guy from a lower division going up on short notice. The Dan Hooker fight was on short notice. Dan Hooker had fought like a month before, and it's just like it just adds like this weird dynamic. And this next part isn't true about Jones, but it's a thing that bothers me about Islam's resume, which is that at lightweight, he's just never beaten a top contender. Because he got his title shot without fighting a top contender. He got his title shot off of just a big win streak and off of beating Bobby Green and Dan Hooker, but he didn't fight a top contender to get that shot. And then none of his title defenses are against top contenders. The Volk wins are great, of course, but like, he's a champ from a lower weight class. He's not a contender in Islam's weight class. And Poirier was kind of gifted it as like a Lifetime Achievement Award, and Moicano stepped in on short notice to replace Arman. And that's not Islam's fault, and you've got to praise him for taking the fight on short notice, and that's something Jones at points was unwilling to do. He refused to fight Chael Sonnen on short notice and got a whole event canceled, although he was willing to fight OSP on short notice. So it's not Islam's fault that he fought Moicano, but it's just a weird part of his resume. And like, it's the same with Jones. Like, Jones has all these wins against smaller guys, and then he has these like dicey wins against guys his own size, against Dominic Reyes, against Thiago Santos, against Alexander Gustafsson the first time. And Islam doesn't really have any dicey wins on that level. He's got some close wins, like the Arman fight and the Volk fight. Close. Relatively close. He still clearly won both of those. I don't think either of those could even be called like controversial in a serious sense, but they were close. And then Jones goes up, he fights Cyril Gane and just nukes him. And similarly, Islam goes up, he fights JDM, and he doesn't nuke him because he doesn't finish him, but he beats him like so comfortably that it's not much of a contest. And another thing that makes those two things similar is that in both cases, you're kind of fighting a guy who's not obviously the best in the division. Now, at least in JDM's case, JDM was the sitting champion. So, like, he was the champ. He had just won the belt. Islam went up and had fought and beaten the sitting champ. So, what more can you ask of him? Whereas in John's case, it was for a vacant belt. And it was against the top contender, but it was for a vacant belt. Against a guy who had just lost to the former champion and arguably won. But nevertheless, it was not against the champion. But JDM is in a weird spot because, I think a lot of people looked at Bilal Muhammad and questioned whether he was actually the best welterweight in the world when you had guys like Shavkat around. And then JDM got kind of gifted a title shot and beat him and hadn't defended his belt yet. And we'll see what he does now that he's lost to Islam. Maybe this win will age spectacularly and JDM will win the belt back after Islam retires or something. But JDM might go on to lose to Morales or to Brady or to Gary or to Shavkat. And very quickly it's going to be well, yeah, you beat this guy, and yeah, he was the champion, and you are a double champion. And yeah, it was a great win, but he wasn't the best in the division. And again, that's similar to Jones's win over Gane, where it's that's a very good win. You were very dominant. That guy is one of the best guys in the division, and we'll see how it plays out with Gane and with Aspinall. But I think still to this day, most people view Aspinall and Ngannou as the actual top heavyweights and not Gane. And yet Jones was the heavyweight champ. And similarly, Jones went on to defend his belt against old man Stipe instead of Aspinall, instead of the actual contender, instead of his fucking interim champion. And Islam is flirting with the idea of either defending his belt against, he's flirting with the idea of defending his belt against old man Usman, which would be, that's very similar to being John Jones, winning the heavyweight belt, and then instead of defending it against Tom, defending it against Stipe. Because now it's Islam moving up, beating JDM, and instead of fighting Gary or Shavkat or Morales, or whoever you think is the actual top contender, he fights fucking old man Usman. And I haven't seen Islam call for this, but a lot of fans are calling for him to fight Ilya. And sure, that would be a great fight. Of course, I'd be hyped to see that. But that's just not a legitimate defense of the welterweight belt. And so it's a weird, both of the two main defenses being brought up, Usman and Ilya, are just kind of fake defenses. They'd be cool fights. They'd still be good wins in their own ways, but they're kind of fake defenses of the welterweight belt in much the same way. Beating old man Stipe, I mean, it's neither of those are as bad. Even old man Usman is not as bullshit of a fight as Stipe was for Jones. Don't get me wrong, but it's still similar. And it's just this very odd series, this pattern, this series of things, the cheating, the drugs, the beating up small guys, the moving up and having a dominant win for the title, but having it be against maybe not the best guy in the division, and then angling for this bullshit title defense of that belt instead of a legitimate title defense of that belt. And the whole thing puts a bad taste in my mouth in a weird way, and it makes it hard to gauge Islam's legacy. Now, bear in mind, I rank already, no matter what happens, Islam could just lose next, and just it wouldn't matter. I still rank him higher than John Jones as an all-time great. Additionally, I made a GOAT list video last summer, and I'll probably make a new GOAT list video early 2026, and then I'll probably make another one later that year. Because we're still watching things play out. We've got to see some things that happen with Merab, that happen with Ilya, that happen with Alex. We've got to see some things happen later in these guys' careers, and it's going to affect their rankings, I'm sure. But if you go back and watch my old GOAT list video, I had Islam at number 9. And quickly, I'll just list you my top 10. From 10 to 1, from worst to best, I had Fedor, Islam, Anderson Silva, Khabib, Merab, then from 5 down, Jose Aldo, Mighty Mouse, John Jones, Volkanovski, and GSP. And already, I'm not putting out my list yet, I'm still thinking about it. Already, that's going to be shuffled a bit. And already with this win over JDM, which is the only win Islam's gotten since I made that first video, already this win over JDM has me putting him ahead of Khabib, ahead of Jones. Jones has taken some drops here a little bit. I'm not going to say exactly where he is, but he's up there. He's not number 1. I'll say definitively. I'm not putting Islam at number 1 yet, but he's close. He's close. And he's made a big leap from I had him again at number 9, and now he's going to be somewhere close to 1. Not at 1, but close to 1. And to me, it's annoying that we're sort of in this situation because he could be number 1. Like, and if he defends his belt in a legitimate defense, I would put him at number 1. Like, if he defends his belt against Morales or Shavkat, or, maybe Gary wins against Muhammad and he defends it against Gary, like, if he defends it against one of those guys, I would put him at number 1. I'll say that right now. He'd be number 1, and it would take something pretty extreme, like Merab going up and fighting Volk, or it would take something really extreme for anyone else to usurp him. But as it stands, it's just weird. Like it's hard to know exactly what to make of this, because on the one hand, he is, he's got arguably the best run in his division's history at lightweight. He beat the champion below twice, and it was a great champion. And he went up and he beat the champion above, and he made it look easy. So, in that sense, it's pretty elite. I've also seen that before. I mean, GSP had his run. He beat BJ Penn, who was the champion below, and he went up and beat Bisping. And it was a similar... Like, if you think about it, most of these double champ situations, the guys they beat are just not obviously the best guy in the division, typically. When the smaller guy comes up and wins, typically whoever the sitting champion is above is just not the best guy in the division and not a champion on the level of the lower guy. Just think about it. Conor McGregor moves up, fights Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez was just not the best guy in the division at that time. Khabib was around, Tony was around, not the best guy. Got kind of gifted a title shot against RDA, and good for him, he knocked him out, but still, clearly not the best guy in the division. Henry Cejudo moves up, fights for the vacant belt against Marlon Moraes. Not the best guy in the division. GSP moves up, fights Michael Bisping, whilst Bisping's ducking Yoel and Robert Whittaker. Bisping, great win for GSP, but clearly not the best guy in the division. John Jones moves up, fights Cyril Gane. Again, not the best guy in the division. You have to go back in time to find, some really good ones. So, BJ Penn beating Matt Hughes. Legit. Dan Henderson beating Wanderlei Silva. Legit. A little more recently, Daniel Cormier beating Stipe Miocic. Very legit. Clearly a great champion fighting a great champion. Clearly the best heavyweight at the time. Cormier beats him. Although even that is diminished a bit because then Stipe goes on to win the trilogy. But, and then another one would be Amanda Nunes beating Chris Cyborg. That's another legit great champion defeating great champion above. But the kind of more notable examples of this tend to be ones where it's some great champion or, potentially great champion, someone like McGregor, goes up and fights someone who's just not the best in the division. Same with Ilya moving up and fighting Charles for the vacant belt. Charles was not obviously the best lightweight in the world, and not just because Ilya left, but even of the remaining people, he was not obviously the best. And it was for a vacant belt, and Ilya won, and that's a great win and everything, but there's a lot of fool's gold in this double champ situation. And some of that is true for Islam too. Now, if you were to rank all of them, it's hard to say exactly where beating JDM lands compared to all the other ones I listed. It's definitely not the worst. But, it might be on the level of Conor beating Eddie, maybe. But in any case, it just leaves me wanting because, again, I had Islam ranked at number 9, and most people would have me rank him number 1 with this win, and I'm just not sure that this win does that. And it annoys me because a lot of people who are willing to, who like me are willing to put steroid cheats on their lists, think John Jones is number 1 or number 2, and that, again, is questionable, I think. Jones was on top forever. Jones has a couple of great wins against guys like Glover and DC. Jones just effectively never lost. I mean, he should have lost to Reyes, and, you know, that's kind of, in some ways, analogous to, like, Islam having this one loss, which was legit, a knockout loss, but it's early in his UFC run, and it's something that that wouldn't be replicable. But in any case, like Jones, because of all these asterisks, you know, I don't think is as good as his resume might suggest he is. And Islam is better because he's doing it in a much better pair of divisions. But in any case, it just, I would like it to be cleaner. I would just like this to be, you know, I would like Islam to have, like, beaten Arman in the rematch or something like that, or have had to fight someone like him to get his title shot. And I would like the welterweight champion that he beat to obviously be the best welterweight. And I would like, you know, and since we can't get in either of those things, I would at least like his fucking title defense to be against someone who has a strong case for being the top contender at welterweight. And not against Old Man Usman and not against Ilia Topuria. Now, if Islam does that, and if Ilia defends his belt, then yeah, make that fight. Let Ilia go up. But I don't know. It's just, as someone who cares about the GOAT discussion and someone who talks quite a bit about legacy, like, I don't know. It's just too muddled. It's too hard to know how to interpret it. Whereas we have some other guys who have just bulletproof resumes, where even, you know, or at least in their title runs, you know, like I said, even GSP, like his win over Bisping is like, has some fool's gold in it. But at least in like their title runs, guys like GSP, guys like Khabib, guys like Merab, like there's just guys like Volkanovski, like there's kind of stronger as champions, as like, you know, guys who got to the belt and defended the belt. There's stronger resumes in terms of beating the top contenders. And that's not necessarily all that matters, you know, but, you know, dominance, longevity, win streaks, multi-divisional success, etc. That stuff all matters too. And Islam has those things in spades. Well, not longevity yet, but in terms of win streaks and multi-divisional success and dominance, you know, he has what you want. Like him tying Anderson Silva's record with a 16 fight win streak in the UFC, that's monumental. Like in some ways to me, that's like bigger than getting a second belt in some ways. And even Merab is still, I think, 2 away from that. But I don't know, just I would like to see more, and I would like it to kind of settle some of this murkiness. Now, unfortunately, I doubt we'll get that. I suspect he'll either fight Usman or Ilia, but, you know, which I'd still be hyped for. I'd still like to see Usman get that shot, and I'd be interested in the stylistic matchup, and I'd, of course, be interested in seeing Ilia fight Islam, but I don't know. Again, as someone who cares about the GOAT discussion, I want some fucking clarity here, and I'm not getting it. So that's what I've got on that.